Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live.
I feel this melody in the footsteps of the people, rising up in the rhythm of dignity and courage. When I see you, I suddenly believe liberation can flourish, and generosity and humility will save us. And we will use the love our mamas gave us to decolonize the skies above us with praises. Learning from the bravest, the beautiful, nameless creators of a world newly awakened. We on fire and blazing our way out the matrix, guided by a single mother's hand, holding her family together. We already on the other side of never. We're the aunties brewing tea and sipping sweetness from the south to the north. We are here to remind those in D.C. who they working for. That's right, beloved. This song is Freedom Uncovered.
Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live.
What Harriet walked towards, what the people in Selma marched for, what the riots from Stonewall to Ferguson to Minneapolis fought for. A movement of people who pour in dollars but rich in brilliance. We are the millions, the healers who come to heal, the leaders who come to reveal that the right to live means you've had the right to feel what you feel. The right to live means an end to police violence and the passage of the Green New Deal. The right to live is in the wind, and every day we witness in our children's countless talents. The right to live is harmonizing in the voice of Yara Allen. It is the springtime and you can feel the right to live about to bloom, growing out the organizing of comrades like Sierra and Sharon and Claudia de la Cruz. Esto es el momento de pararnos como madres orgullosas y sonreír, porque no hay nada más esencial que el derecho de vivir. The right to live is a simple truth to return us to ourselves. It is a spell being cast upon a lost and divided nation to heal the wounds of hate and incarceration with a love so bold it includes everybody. Feel that, everybody. And when you fight for those rights, they become the lights for us to follow through these long dark nights. This is a promise to be radically honest and declare we are worthy of food to eat and housing to sleep in and schools to dream in and just being human beings. We are worthy of love. And so the Poor People's Campaign has come to bring our freedom into being. You will know we've arrived because you will hear us sing.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you are here. We were just chatting a bit before you came in, and I was reminiscing that it's hard to believe the Poor People's Campaign has been in existence now almost 4 years. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those who was with the campaign early on. I heard about the Poor People's Campaign and then went to the internet to see what it was really about. And the message that I got was the Poor People's Campaign is about people in need, people suffering and hurting in the wealthiest nation that there ever existed. As I looked, I saw that the Poor People's Campaign featured people and let people speak for themselves. I was impacted and impressed by the testimonies that people were giving about their conditions and had a hard time accepting that this could happen, this could exist in such large numbers in this wealthy nation that prides itself on success. Two people especially moved my heart. That was Callie Greer, a mother from Selma, Alabama, who was in mourning. Basically, she had lost her son Mercury to gun violence and then watched her daughter Venus suffer a slow, agonizing death to cancer because she lived in Selma, Alabama. Alabama's a state that did not accept, still has not accepted extended Medicare. Her death, at least with such suffering, was totally unnecessary. She had to plead and beg and wait long times for every bit of medicine that she needed. And finally, in great pain and suffering, she passed. But there are so many, hundreds of thousands of people in our country who are still suffering, and there is still a need for the Poor People's Campaign. We must fight. We must be successful. We must make change. I forgot. I'm Virginia Hollins Davidson. Welcome. Please introduce yourselves in the chat by sharing your name, your pronouns, and your location. Closed captioning is available. Put questions and comments in the chat, please, and stay on mute unless you're speaking to the group. Now my cohort, Mason, will give you some more instructions and introduce himself. And we'd like to give thanks and applause to some volunteers who are helping us out with tech. That is Peg, Nell, and also Mason, playing double roles. All right, go for it, Mason.
Thank you, Virginia. Hi, everybody. It's great to have you here today. I've been with the Poor People's Campaign since probably June of 2020. And I was looking for ways to be more consistently and frequently involved in efforts toward racial justice and social justice, and knew that I wanted that to be a volunteer role, not just, something I would do occasionally to learn or meet with friends, but taking some sort of regular, frequent action. So I began looking around and looking at different organizations, and the Poor People's Campaign attracted me for a number of reasons. I think we'll be sharing a number of those today in our presentation, but I think primarily the strong ethical and spiritual foundation of the organization. Not spiritual in the sense that there's exclusivity. I mean, actually, one factor that appealed to me was that it was inclusive of, various faiths and no faith, that it was transpartisan or nonpartisan in its efforts, that it was considered itself a movement more than an organization, and was always looking to collaborate and link up with other similar movements. And all of these were factors that made me inspired to be involved. So I hope today can be informative, casual, friendly. We're going to get to know each other a little bit, and we'll have time for questions in the end, and that whatever is calling you to learn more continues to inspire you to get involved, however that works in your lives at the moment. One little bit of housekeeping up front is, after a presentation that Virginia and I will share, we'll be meeting each other in breakout groups by region, so we can get a sense for who else is in our area and how we might begin to work together. So to do that most effectively, it would help for each of us to update how our name is displayed here in Zoom, so that we have a sense of where you are in California. So if you look at my name, you'll see a BA in front of Mason, and that stands for Bay Area. And in the chat, we will post, or probably have already posted, those different initials, and we'd ask you to just for this meeting, update how your name is displayed to include the initials for your region. And you do that by hovering over your picture and clicking the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. And then there's an option for rename. And then you can just type in those initials there. So Oakland and San Francisco Bay Area will be BA, Central Coast will be CC, Inland Empire, IE, Los Angeles, LA, Orange County, OC, San Fernando Valley, NE, San Diego, SD, Sacramento, ST. And then if you don't live in one of those regions, you can place an AL in front of your name for at large. And that will help us have everybody properly organized after the presentation in breakout groups. Well, thanks so much. And now we will begin presentation. So
In this short presentation, we'll give a bit of history from the 1968 campaign, the 2017 call and 2018 launch of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, the structure of the campaign, some examples of how we take action, and information about how you can get involved. The image on this slide is the national campaign logo, with a silhouette of a massive group of people with flags above the words Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
So in 1967 and 1968, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leaders, and others came together to forge a campaign to bring national attention to the unjust economic conditions facing millions of people worldwide. In November 1967, Dr. King announced the Poor People's Campaign to challenge economic inequality, militarism, and poverty. He articulated a clear formula for how the poor can claim the power that resides within our communities and create what he called a new and unsettling force. His vision emphasized the importance of respect for poor people and the need for poor Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans to unite. The image description for this slide is a Black woman with "I Have a Dream" sign on the back of her raincoat as she walks in the mud of Resurrection City.
Next, an effort to revive a famous movement of the 1960s focused on reducing poverty, inequality, and tackling social justice. But with such a broad agenda, will it find enough support at this polarized time? We start with a look at the campaign that began 50 years ago. Shortly before his death in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expanded his civil rights campaign to include calls for economic justice. He called for an economic revolution that included protection and services for the poorest Americans. He would call it the Poor People's Campaign.
We're coming to get our check.
The campaign would bring together poor people from across the country and from across racial, ethnic, and geographic lines, including poor whites, for a march on Washington.
Even if you have to bring a whole family, we are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions.
The first step was to construct a shanty town called Resurrection City on the National Mall, housing thousands of participants in a form of nonviolent civil disobedience. Dr. King himself would never make it to the March on Washington. He died that spring. But weeks after his assassination, 50,000 people gathered in solidarity, demanding economic reform on the steps where Dr. King had professed, "I have a dream."
We come with an appeal to open the doors of America to the almost 50 million Americans who have not been given a fair share of America's wealth and opportunity.
Half a century later, a group of religious and moral leaders are planning a wave of civil disobedience in Washington, a revival of the Poor People's Campaign. It is headed in part by the Reverend William Barber, who's the co-chair of the campaign. He led demonstrators at a rally in front of the U.S. Capitol this month, and he was arrested, alongside the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a key figure in the 1968 movement. I spoke with Reverend Barber recently when he was in Washington. Reverend William Barber, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you very much for joining us. When the original Poor People's Campaign took place, it was 50 years ago. Dr. Martin Luther King was involved. After he was assassinated, it continued. But what is the connection between then and now?
Well, thank you so much for having us. And on behalf of the campaign, the National Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival, and my co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, let me say that the connection was, first of all, that it did continue, that people realized Dr. King was right. Racism, poverty, and militarism were interconnected. The connection today is we did a study, we commissioned a study with the Institute for Policy Studies and also had some help with Urban Institute, anecdotal and empirical data. And we did something called the Souls of Poor Folk, auditing America 50 years after the Poor People's Campaign. What did we find? Today, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people. Today, there are 250,000 people that die every year from low wealth. We have less voting rights today because of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act than we had in 1965. We have 62 million people who are working poor, who work for less than a living wage, and 14 million children who are in poverty.
Those numbers are overwhelming. They are daunting. You're not proposing to do away with poverty, are you?
We are saying that there are 5 interlocking injustices that America has to face because they continue to cause policy violence. That is systemic racism, particularly seen through the lens of voter suppression, where people use voter suppression to get elected, and then once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt the poor, mostly white women, children, and the working poor. Systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy and militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism that says you don't have to address those issues. We are saying, yes, America is going to have to face these 5 interlocking injustices and change them.
Why can't you work through the existing political system, work to elect political figures who agree with your agenda?
Well, several reasons. Number one, we had 26 presidential debates in the last presidential election. On the Democrat and Republican side, not 1 hour was spent on poverty. Not 1 hour was spent on voter suppression and restoring the Voting Rights Act. Not 1 hour on the war economy and militarism. So if we're not even having the conversation, the first thing we have to change is the attention violence. We have an attention violence when it comes to poverty and the poor, and we must change that before you can change the agenda. And it must be a movement of the people from the bottom up.
Reverend Barber, I talk to people, I've read folks who agree with much of what you are saying you want, but they also are saying you're asking for too many different things, that you should narrow your list of ambitions, that you'll have a much better chance at getting something done.
Well, then those same people should say narrow the Constitution because it's pretty ambitious. It says domestic tranquility, establishment of justice, providing for the common defense, promoting the welfare, general welfare. Narrow the moral call of the Bible that says you're supposed to care for the stranger, the hungry, the sick, the left out, the lonely, the imprisoned. Why is it that that wealthy and greed gets to ask for everything? They want tax cuts, they get that. They want to block health care, they get that. But then we tell poor people, you have to ask for one thing. 37 million people without health care, we have to fight for health care. Millions of people without living wages. We can't just ask for one thing because they are systemically interlocking injustices.
If there are so many who you define as poor in this country, why aren't we seeing more people rise up and make this argument? I mean, it's right now it's left to you and a relatively small group of people who are making this argument, having the march, having your demonstrations and so forth.
Well, I don't know if I would say a relatively small group. We have organizing committees in 40 states. We have people who are organizing. In the last 2 weeks, we've had thousands of people attend, over nearly 2,000 people do civil disobedience, more than ever in the history of this country, simultaneously doing nonviolent moral fusion, civil disobedience. There is a rising, and why? And so What we're doing is we're launching a movement. We're not ending a movement. We're launching a movement and calling people to action. Many people do not know how bad it is, and many people who are poor and low wealth have been broken and pushed down and ignored. But where we're going from West Virginia to Wisconsin, from Alabama to Alaska, we're finding that there are thousands of people who are saying it's time for us to stand up and refuse to be silent.
You've said that the nation's problem is not that we don't have enough money. You said it's that we don't have the moral capacity to face what ails society. What did you mean by that?
That when you look at our deepest moral framework of the Constitution and our deepest moral values of our religious tradition, we too often have a political conversation that talks about left versus right, military or middle class. That's too puny, it's too narrow. 43.5% of this country is poor and low wealth. People are dying. Even Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, said that America has to face the cost of inequality. What I'm saying is we can't just have a left-right argument anymore. We need to have a deeply moral argument that says this is not just about Democrats or Republicans. This is about America. What kind of democracy do we want to be? You cannot have a democracy continue to exist when 400 people make an average of $97,000 an hour and you lock people up who simply want 15 in the union.
Does either political party come closer to your goals?
Well, I think they can. I think they hit at it. I think, of course, the extremists who have taken over the Republican Party have just gone so far extreme. You know, they're more focused on tax cuts to the wealthy. They want to blame poor people for their problems. Democrats, on the other hand, are willing to talk about, say, the Affordable Care Act and talk about the middle class. But the reality is neither party is willing to put right in front of America the issues of systemic racism, of systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and say the word poverty. It's almost as though we've tried to remove even saying the word poverty, when in fact the majority of the poor people in this country are white, women, children, working people, and the disabled. So we have to change our narrative in this country. And the only way you can change the narrative is to change the narrator. That's why this campaign is focused on three things: breaking through the narrative, massive voter mobilization among the poor, and power building from the bottom up.
Reverend William Barber, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So unfortunately, the unity and organization needed for the Poor People's Campaign of 1968 to complete all of its planned stages and form this new and unsettling force capable of disrupting complacent national life and achieving an economic Bill of Rights was not easy to come by. The assassinations of Dr. King and Senator Robert Kennedy, a key proponent of the campaign and a presidential candidate, served to cripple the campaign and greatly limit its impact. Midway through the campaign, Robert Kennedy, whose wife had attended the Mother's Day opening of Resurrection City, was assassinated. Out of respect for the campaign, his funeral procession passed through the encampment. The Department of the Interior forced Resurrection City to close on the 24th of June, 1968, after the permit to use parkland expired. The image on this slide displays ministers and others singing and marching together in Washington, D.C. Reverend Jesse Jackson and Indian rights activist Melvin Tom are among those pictured.
In the face of setbacks due to political violence and assassinations, as well as the difficulties of sustaining a national movement, the Poor People's Campaign of 1968 nevertheless had an impact, not only on governmental policies, but also on public perceptions. The campaign pushed Congress and federal agencies to allocate millions for programs, including Head Start and education/welfare services for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, while it helped catalyze the desegregation of schools and extension of labor programs. Significantly, the campaign introduced new strategies for protests and social change. The movement also helped transform national discussions on race, class, economic opportunities, security, and democracy. The image description for this slide is period sign that says "Feed folks."
Now we are going to hear about the current Poor People's Campaign. On December 4th, 2017, the 50th anniversary of the announcement of the first Poor People's Campaign, the diverse leadership came together in Washington, D.C. to launch the new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, co-chaired by Bishop Dr. William J. Barber, the second of Repairers of the Breach, and Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis of the Kairos Center, with the support of many organizations, denominations, and individuals, now in 45 states across the country. The campaign launched with two primary goals. One, change the narrative by changing the narrator. That means putting more focus on who and why people are poor and amplifying the voices of those most impacted by the systemic forces that keep people in poverty. And two, build power to change policy through a fusion movement that unites communities and partner organizations. The image description on this slide is a photo of Bishop Barber and Reverend Theoharis wearing "Jesus was a poor man" stoles in front of a rose window.
The new Poor People's Campaign is building on the idea of fusion movements that have brought progressive change throughout history. What does a fusion movement mean? The modern Poor People's Campaign, a movement, not a moment. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is an organism, not an organization. Lists from the bottom, confronts the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, is a fusion movement. And what does a fusion movement mean? It means recognizing the construct of race and racism used to keep us apart, building a broad, diverse coalition, intentionally diversifying the movement, engaging in indigenously led grassroots organizing, committing to nonviolent action, and resisting the one moment mentality. We are building a movement. You'll find in the chat a link to excerpts from 14 Steps to Moral Fusion Organizing.
On this slide, we have condensed a version of 12 fundamental principles of the Poor People's Campaign, which guide our work. We read the full principles at many of our local meetings to ground ourselves in the work. They are worth time studying if you want to get involved. And again, you can find the full description of the principles at the Poor People's Campaign website, as well as through the link in the chat. Also, please note the last principle on the list, embrace nonviolence. Because it is particularly important for folks considering joining the campaign as a volunteer. Violent tactics and actions will not be tolerated, period. You will be asked to sign a covenant of nonviolence as part of the California Poor People's Campaign if you engage in any direct action events, such as sitting in at the Capitol in Sacramento. The covenant of nonviolence is far more than a document to sign when engaging in direct action. It is an ideal woven through all the principles of the campaign, especially because others may try to disrupt and weaken the foundation of our work. The image on this slide is a Poor People's Campaign sign by artist David Solnit, which says, "We rise together," in black on a yellow disc with silhouettes of marching people in black. The bottom says, "Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival."
Given the U.S. population is estimated at slightly higher than 300 million, the fact that 140 million of our people are poor or low income means that more than 40% of the population lives in poverty. 40% of the United States population lives in poverty. These statistics are pre-COVID and do not include the estimated 8 million who would be included as a result of the pandemic. These statistics are drawn from the Supplemental Poverty Measure, an alternative approach to assessing who is poor that differs from the official poverty measure, which is limited and outdated. When the official poverty measure is quoted publicly, it often does not reflect the full scale of poverty in this country. You can read more about these measurements in the campaign's moral budget from the website. The link is in the chat.
Part of grassroots organizing is to go out, listen, and engage with people most affected by the policies that keep poor people down. The Poor People's Campaign has taken to bus tours to engage with their supporters and form state organizing committees. The campaign's early tours brought together those drawn from all segments of the fusion movement. The 2019 tour highlighted the voices of the poor in hearings on homelessness, mass incarceration, and the criminalization of poverty. During the election year of 2020, the campaign MORE Tour stands for MORE, stands for Mobilizing, Organizing, Registering, and Educating Tour, and engaging and empowering low-wage, low-propensity voters for a movement that votes, a new movement building commitment to its aims and principles among new and existing campaign supporters. This national tour kicked off in June 2019 and was meant to be ongoing until May 2020. Our wonderful December 2019 tour stop in San Francisco was one of the last in-person events. Subsequently, 4 states had their tour stops canceled, but soon the campaign took to Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Zoom. Recordings of the Facebook Live feeds are available on the National Campaign's Facebook page. The image on this slide is about 30 people with signs standing in front of a yellow school bus in Massachusetts.
Bishop Barber emphasizes that we cannot make demands without data. The Poor People's Campaign has undertaken and continues to conduct extensive research to create accurate, current information about poverty and the poor. You'll find links to all of these studies and research documents on the campaign's website. We started with the Souls of Poor Folk Moral Audit, which provided a data-driven analysis of the historical and empirical realities of poverty in the past 50 years since the 1968 campaign. The most recent, Waking the Sleeping Giant, Poor and Low-Income Voters in the 2020 Elections, reports findings that support the campaign's analysis that organizing among the poor around an agenda that represents their concerns can fundamentally change the political map of this country and lead to policies that are just and representative for all Americans. The image description for this slide is the logos of the Institute for Policy Studies, the Poor People's Campaign, Cairo Center, and Repairers of the Breach are pictured across the bottom of the slide. Now we'll look at the campaign structure.
Because the Poor People's Campaign is a joint project of Repairers of the Breach and the Cairo Center, the staff from these nonprofits manage the national campaign, coordinating events, policies, and other activities. The campaign itself is all volunteer. The image description for this slide is a map of California that shows its regions.
Given California's size, we also have several regional steering committees in addition to the state coordinating committee. They include the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Inland Empire, Sacramento, Orange County, Northeast San Fernando Valley, and San Diego. The new Central Coast region includes 3 counties, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura. The image description is a map of California showing the regions.
Our work is carried out by statewide and regional working groups. You can use the feedback form in the chat to get more information or get connected to statewide or working groups in your region. The images on this slide are 3 photos of different actions taken in different regions.
One tool for building the campaign is our statewide meetings, which everyone is invited to join. We invite you to share your talents and skills. We always need facilitators for the Jubilee study groups and welcome sessions and tech support for all meetings and events. You don't have to be a lawyer to join the legal working group, which meets bi-monthly. You don't have to be an artist to join the art theomusicology working group. The image description is a Zoom meeting screen in gallery view. The next set of slides feature local, statewide, and national actions that give some idea of the kinds of activities we engage in to advance our agenda.
Art and theomusicology are integral elements of the campaign, not an afterthought. In 2020, based on the campaign's core message and song, which you heard earlier today, Everybody's Got a Right to Live, Californians statewide chose a letter to make and took a picture with that letter, which was assembled into a virtual mural. You may be asked at some point to submit a photo with a letter to help with our messaging. Seeing many people's faces supporting our messages has a special magic. The image on this slide is a variety of people holding signs spelling out "Everybody's got a right to live" on a yellow background with the heading "California Poor People's Campaign."
You may have joined some of our Moral Monday broadcasts. On March 15th, 2021, in more than 30 states, we had demand deliveries of the 14 policy priorities to the state capitals. Here in California, we drove to Sacramento, read the 14 points on the Capitol Mall, and delivered them to the state legislature. The image description, a Zoom webinar screen from a Moral Monday, shows 2 scenes in California and an American Sign Language interpreter.
The recently expanded child tax credit means that families that had previously been too poor to qualify for the benefit are now eligible. The Policy and Political Education Working Group designed informational flyers, which we've been distributing throughout the state. The Benefits Access Working Group has also been doing outreach through its getcovidresources.org portal. Please check it out, share it. On this slide, there's 1 photo and 2 flyers. In the upper left, 3 women holding flyers are standing outside. The lower left, there's a black and white flyer with info about the child tax credit. And on the right, there's a flyer from the Sacramento Poor People's Campaign Ice Cream Social, where they distributed info.
Our May 24th Moral Monday featured the launch of the 3rd Reconstruction Congressional Resolution. You may know that following the end of the Civil War, Reconstruction, driven by a moral fusion movement, people from diverse backgrounds, faith traditions, geography, pushed for progressive changes. The Civil Rights Movement was a second Reconstruction that brought dramatic change in public policy. Yet the work is not yet done, so we're building a 3rd construction to more fully address poverty from the bottom up. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. This image shows a webinar screen with Bishop Barber, Reverend Theo Harris, and Congress members Barbara Lee and Pramila Jayapal with an American Sign Language interpreter.
This resolution recognizes that in order to build a true 3rd Reconstruction, we must simultaneously deal with the 5 interlocking injustices that Bishop Barber mentioned in the video. Currently, there are 8 California reps who've signed on, 41 nationwide. You can read and find info about which congressional reps have signed the resolution by clicking the link in the chat. Please sign it and share the petition urging Congress to pass the 3rd Reconstruction Resolution. The link will be in the chat. On this slide, there are 2 pictures. On the left, a group of 8 people with various banners and signs in Santa Clara County. And on the right, a group of 4 people with a black man holding a microphone in Santa Barbara.
Fundamental principle number 11 states, we uphold the need to do a season of sustained moral direct action as a way to break through the tweets and shift the moral narrative. We are demonstrating the power of people coming together across issues, geography, and putting our bodies on the line to the issues that are affecting us all. Since July 12th, we have had nonviolent direct actions in the states and in the Capitol to press our demands that Congress end the filibuster, pass all provisions of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, fully restore all provisions of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. In December, we were back in the streets to demand the Senate pass the Build Back Better Act. This image shows 5 photos. Upper left is a banner held by 6 women announcing the women-led action in Washington, D.C. The lower left has 2 Bay Area women being processed after arrest. And the center is a photo of a woman being arrested, holding a sign that reads, "Protect Our Vote." In the upper right, a woman in a crowd behind a police line, a man with a white can, and a woman standing inside a police line.
On July 26th, as part of the Season of Moral Nonviolent Direct Action, the California campaign held direct actions at Senator Dianne Feinstein's Los Angeles and San Francisco offices. Here are 2 photos. One on the left, 4 people holding a sign, sitting blocking the office door. And on the right, 15 people hold a 40-foot banner that reads, "Senator Feinstein busts the filibuster," in front of an office building.
Hey, Congress, we coming. We've been planning for June 18th, 2022, when we'll be in person for a mass Poor People's Assembly in Washington, D.C. As part of the Mobilizing California Poor People's Campaign, we'll be hosting a Stop of the More tour in May. This is a new More tour. We're mobilizing, organizing, registering, and engaging and educating people for a movement who vote. We need your help. On this image is a banner in black, gold, and white with a map of the United States east of the Mississippi River, with arrows pointing toward Washington, D.C. In the upper left corner, a picture of the co-chairs leading a massive march in the center. We must do more in the upper right, and info about the assembly and march at the bottom that says Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington. Next is a short promo video about the upcoming event.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Justice is coming soon. Hey, do you believe that of today?
You can visit poorpeoplescampaign.org and check out the Take Action section, where you'll find an ever-changing array of actions and policy documents. Third Reconstruction resolution link is in the chat. On this slide, you'll see the Poor People's Campaign logo with a national call for moral revival. It's a poster, with silhouettes of marchers across the top. You can also follow us on Twitter. And here we have an image of a Black man with a megaphone in front of a march with a banner and many people behind it.
You can find us on Facebook as well. The links are in the chat. David Solnit illustrations for the Jubilee Policy Platform, including a needle and thread stitching together the nation with a moral revolution, is on this image. And at the bottom are tags with the 5 interlocking injustices and a pair of scissors.
We always appreciate donations of any amount. We will drop in the chat info to donate online or through our fiscal sponsor, Aetna. Environmentalism through inspiration and nonviolent action. Please check the chat for a link.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. Thank you for attending. Please fill out the feedback form by clicking or copying the link from the chat. It includes space for you to say how you want to be involved, and we strongly urge, encourage, and welcome you to be involved. Our image is people marching behind a Poor People's Campaign banner in Washington, D.C.
So hopefully some of these slides were informative for everybody and provided, enough history and context for how we're currently operating. But a lot of some of the next 20 or 30 minutes can be even more informative as we talk with each other, and we'll do some Q&A with each other after our breakouts. But for now, we're going to go into breakouts for about 20 minutes. And for those who may have arrived a little bit after we started, we are going to do breakouts based on region. So it looks like almost everyone has updated their name in Zoom to include those abbreviations. But if you haven't, we're actually just updating the way our names are displayed in Zoom to include that. So if you look in the chat, you'll see a list of different abbreviations based on regions in California. And if you hover over your image, click on the 3 dots, and then select rename, you can add the abbreviation in front of your name that corresponds with the region you're in, and then we will know which group to put you in. So we'll just give a couple people a minute to do that. And then just some basic suggestions for our breakout groups. I would suggest everyone just briefly introducing themselves, sharing name, pronouns, where you're living and located, maybe what attracted you to this meeting or to the Poor People's Campaign. Sometimes it can help to have a facilitator of your group. So if somebody wants to volunteer to just lead the discussion, that's always appreciated. But yeah, we just encourage you to share openly about what's inspiring you and what questions you may have. So when we get back together after the breakout groups, we'll have a chance to raise hands, and Virginia and I and Nell and Peg will do our best to answer your questions then. So Virginia, anything else that you'd like to add before we go into breakout groups?
So unless I've forgotten something, I will just encourage you to have an open and fun and interesting discussion in your group, and we'll see you when you come back.
Okay, so we've set up the breakout groups, and you may end up in a group with people. You may be like the only person from your region, and so you'll be in a room with other people who are not from your region. But just make the best of it and learn what you can from what other people are doing, and share what you're doing in your region. And yeah, enjoy. And I'm going to go ahead and open all those rooms. You should receive an invitation. Please accept it. Everybody is back now, Virginia.
Okay. All right. So we're going to give you the opportunity to give some feedback. You can ask a question. You can make comments. Tell us something about what happened in your group. So raise your hand and unmute yourself to speak. You can also put comments, responses, next steps in the chat. And feedback can be sent to us via the feedback form. So we'll share a link for that.
Yeah, so for those of you who might be new to Zoom, you can raise your hand by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of the screen and then select raise hand. Or if you don't see that, just physically raise your hand and we'll try to see you. But Tim, feel free to unmute yourself. And
there we go. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So thank you for this. Thanks for facilitating all this. This is great. I was talking with Linda, I think, and Omar, and they were in LA. So she was saying there was an LA chapter. How do I get a hold of the LA chapter? Because, or is there an Orange County chapter? I think I'm the only one in OC here. Does anybody know?
Yes. So they're actually, LA is a region and Orange County is also a region. And so given that, we do so many things virtually, you're welcome to join any meeting that you're interested in joining, really. But I can put you in contact with Lisa Peterson, who actually is a member of this working group, the speaker training working group and the outreach working group, share responsibility for this welcome session. And Lisa is one of the members. And so she is the convener of the Orange County Regional Steering Committee. And so if you fill out that feedback form, I will pass your information on to her and she can let you know what's happening.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. Elliot?
Yeah, just wondering, you mentioned there's an art build. What is that for? And just what's the plan for California? I know there's the thing in DC, but what, if any, is the plan like for the next few months for us here in the state or the Bay Area?
Right. So we're entering a season of very intensive planning for the events. The more tour stop, mobilizing, organizing, registering, and engaging, educating, and empowering people for a movement that votes. That is scheduled for May 9th. It'll be a Moral Monday. And we are having, the intention is that it will be a mass mobilization of the Western region, because we won't be able to take massive numbers to DC, right? Not the kinds of numbers that we would like to be able to turn out to this more tour stop. And so we'll be planning for that. And then building on that, we'll be planning for June 18, 2022, when we will be taking people to impacted people, California contingent to Washington, DC. And so our thinking and visioning and planning and is focused on that, the process of building awareness, engaging individuals, community organizations, unions, schools, faith congregations, everybody who's interested to support that work. And so one of the kind of linchpin events is going to be a statewide faith convening that is scheduled for March 10th. And the proposal is that we use that convening to bring people from around the state who are working in other areas, like the legal working group will be organizing their constituents, people who are, lawyers or interested in the role of legal workers in taking down those interlocking injustices. Same with art and musicology. We'll be, finding the singers and the drummers and, organizing art bills so that there are banners and flags and patches so that we can push our message out in lots of modalities, lots of different ways that we want people to hear us. And so the March 10th will be, building toward that, and then between March and May, and then between May and June. So I just want to say one other thing about that, which is that the repairs of the breach, the anchor organization that's headed by Bishop Barber has secured funding for each state in the campaign to have 2 part-time organizers working 30 hours a week between January and June on the mobilizations that I just spoke about. And so we're going to be, having a structure in place to be doing outreach, to be engaging folks, letting them know what the events are that they can come to find out more information, asking them to organize in their communities, again, towards this idea that we are gonna amplify the voices of people who are directly impacted and have an impact on policy that will reduce poverty.
Going back just a little bit. So the Moral Monday is on May 9th.
Yeah.
And that's basically a call to action. So that's when we all, in whatever cities, whatever area we're going to speak on, we choose a place where we just kind of rally together for the Moral Monday, correct?
Well, let's see. So the May 9th Moral Monday, we're in discussion about what it's going to be, but the proposal is that it will be hybrid. It'll be in person, but those are always broadcast, right? So that people will be able to participate virtually as well, but that we will have an in-person outdoor, COVID aware in-person gathering.
And we don't know where yet, or has that place already been decided?
It has not. Each region put in their bid for why it should be there. So LA had their ideas about why it should be in LA, Orange County, Central Coast, right? The Bay Area, the last more tour stop in 2019 was in the Bay Area. So, we argued that it should be in the Bay Area again, but there wasn't too much sympathy for our position. So we'll see.
It was a great event. So if this one's anything like that, I think we're pushing to make it bigger and better. I think you'll want to be involved. So keep your ears out and engage so you can be a part of making that happen. It was really fun to participate and be a part of it, to have a role, not just an audience member, but to be someone who helped create it and work it out.
Thanks, Linda. Any other comments or questions? Any shares about what was discussed in your group?
I think just in general, those of us in our group kind of felt that this feels more like we're being led. You know what I mean? This isn't something, say, 2 years ago, I would have looked for. And I'm not, I can't speak for the others in my group, but it just seems that we're being led to do something.
Yes, I agree. I'm compelled. That's why I sought you guys out. Well, actually, someone invited me to a meeting not too long ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is good. Let me check it out some more." And so I'm glad that I'm just following the leads that I've been prompted to by Spirit to move forward.
Thanks, Omar. And Linda, I'm just curious, did you mean that in a positive way, or are you preferring something that where you have more of a leadership role? I wasn't sure.
No, in a positive way. You know,
Okay.
it's kind of like that feeling you get when you're driving down the street and something in your head says, don't turn right, go straight and then make a left. You know what I mean? And you follow it and you're okay. Another time that voice would have said, turn right, do this, but this is faster. And you go that way and you end up in a traffic jam. It's that kind of feeling.
Great.
Well, thanks. I mean, the feedback form is really helpful to us too. If you feel compelled about what's happening with the campaign, then I imagine you would want this to resonate with more and more folks. And as people come to these welcome sessions, however we can improve, we're a small team in some ways, but we're meeting frequently, and we have a good working relationship now in terms of improving the presentation and how we do these sessions. So even if it's, minor feedback about how something could be improved, it will help us, help this resonate with more and more people over the coming months.
And you can be where we are, helping to spread the word. We're always looking for people to be presenters, and I can attest that we have leaders who are very patient in helping ones learn how to do the presentation, and you will soon be an expert. So
absolutely.
Definitely.
Great.
If I could just say something, I'm really encouraged by what I heard tonight. I've done some digging. I've read a lot of the platforms, and what I really appreciate about the organization is the data that's there. That it's the information is there, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of the basic foundational work has already been done. So I guess what I'm really saying is, what's the next step? Should I just fill out the survey and then someone would contact me?
Yes.
Okay.
There is a very active Sacramento region. Faye Wilson Kennedy and brother Kevin Carter, are very active in Sacramento and would welcome you with open arms, I am sure, cool. to help with the organizing there. And then any statewide working group, you would also be welcome there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I know that we have to go, but I wanted to just go back to Elliot's question about the art build, that we are going to be making art for the state campaign that to be shared in all the regions this Saturday, the 8th, from 10 to 2 in Richmond. And we'll be making the Jubilee Policy platform. We have like 8 designs that are what we call evergreen art. And so it's like, fight poverty, not the poor. We need a California Poor People's Campaign banner and flags. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. There are a few other of those messages that we're going to be making, doing highlighting and silk screening and art build basically in Richmond. And so you're welcome to join us. I'll put the link to RSVP in the chat.
And you definitely don't have to be an artist, and you will get to know people better, and you will feel good about yourself because you'll feel like you will have created something beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
That link in the chat is for like last May. It says the event has already happened.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Then let me see if I can find. Let's see.
Now, while you're doing that, I'll just share a couple updates or housekeeping items for those of you who might want to experience this session again, just to watch some of the video again or hear some of the data again. We do this every the first Tuesday of every month. So February 1st will be the next welcome session, and then I believe March 1st as well. But whether that's you or other friends, colleagues, et cetera, that you might want to invite, that's when we do these welcome sessions. And it looks like we have a new link in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the feedback, Elliot, and thank you for your patience, everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, so unless there are any final questions, I'll let you close us out, Virginia.
Okay, so this is short and sweet. This is part of our tradition. I'm going to say some words and you respond, and we will do it. It says here 2 times, but I don't know. Growing up in Christian churches, there's something about 3. So we're going to do it 3 times tonight. I will say forward together, and you say not one step back. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not
one step back.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Next time, be safe and well.